Welcome back, everybody, to another growth support conversation. My name is Neil, and today I'm joined by Nivedha, or Niv, to talk about growth as an individual and what it's like in the world of support, and go through your journey and learn a little bit more about it, which I'm really curious to dive into. Do you want to explain yourself and where you're coming from and maybe this journey that you've been on?
Yeah, sure. Firstly, thank you so much, Neil, for having me here. And really excited because I've been watching so many of your podcasts with other support leaders who I really look up to. So it's really awesome to just, be on this side for once. So very exciting. Thank you so much. So I'm Niv. I have been in support for close to 10 years now, recently turned into a founder, solving a support pain point that I had been dealing with for a long time. So my experience is primarily in B2B SaaS companies. So I've, worked in teams where I've been the first support person setting up the entire team, to working at slightly larger teams like Zapier, Postman. I've set up their teams and grown their teams as well, where I started as an individual contributor, moved into leadership roles, have had my team members or people who reported into my team move into their first product management role or their first engineering role through a support role. So this topic is something that's very, very close to my heart, both in terms of me seeing people grow and seeing myself grow. So I'm really excited to dive into this.
Nice. Well, thank you. And I'm sure the people you mentioned that you look up to are also looking up to you as well. I'm sure it goes both ways.
Thank
But it's a
you.
really interesting journey going through from, support rep to solo support to building it out and seeing people make these moves in their careers. I'm curious because one of the things that comes up a lot when we talk about support as a career is, one, it's a stepping stone a bit. Number two, it can be a home for your career, but then ultimately a lot of people do make that lateral move into something else. What do you think is support as a home? Do you think it can be, or do you think that ultimately there is a cap?
I think broadly, no role really has a cap. I think it's just something that somewhere someone has fed into our minds, and it is a myth that I keep hearing every now and then. It keeps resurfacing, and I think uh, I am one of the many, many, many examples that we've seen in the ecosystem of people who've built good, really functional, fruitful careers in support. I think one thing that made a big difference to me in terms of not stopping my growth, and that can happen in any role, by the way. You take a product management role, you take a technical writer role, you take any role. That growth can get stalled if we are not looking at new avenues to learn. So one way that I did that is I come from a commerce marketing background. So that's what I studied in college. So I never really had any computer science background. So I joined a startup in 2014, did sales, but didn't really do that super well back then. So the founder there said, "Hey, why don't you start a support team? Now we have enough customers. We need to start making sure that they are successful in using the product." So that was my stepping stone into support. Now, that was a cloud telephony product. We didn't have a lot to do with tech or backend or APIs and stuff like that. So, I was learning the ropes about what it's like to do support in a tech company. And I think the growth path then happened when I started looking for slightly more challenging support roles. So from a cloud telephony role, I went into another role, another company doing support, where I was now the glue between the global support team and the product and engineering team, which meant that I was actually looking at engineering bugs. I was actually understanding how do we translate these bugs into customer friendly terms, and how do I take customer issues and translate them into engineering issues. So there I started to get deeper into the engineering side. Then the next stepping stone was Zapier, where again it was the most technical product I'd ever worked with. which meant that I had to really learn, how to code. I actually like sat and learned how to code. I didn't really go down that path clearly, but I think it really helped me understand, speak the language of engineers a lot more clearly, which made those bonds between support and engineering and even product that much more stronger. And finally, before I moved into the founder path, I was at Postman, which again was another step up because your end customers are actually developers, right? Like, so me managing a support team, and they were called support engineers because most of them came from an engineering background. And that was how I personally grew in my career. So that's one, I've literally stuck to support as a function through all of these 8 9 years, and I didn't really waver in that, and I still was able to constantly get bigger challenges and get bigger roles either within the same company or move into another company. So yeah.
I think it's really interesting. Like, it's not necessarily always just people think of support probably when you're coming out of university or something like that. A lot of people probably think like, oh, it's a call center. I'm going to sit. I'm just going to help people. I'm going to do this kind of a thing. But the entire journey that you've just gone through is very much more complex and large, and actually being able to help the organization grow and fill those needs and be that value driver as an individual for the organization where you're needed the most, and kind of be able to fill those, be the bridge for a lot of those things. And at the same time, you're taking on much more challenging skill sets. I think one of
Yeah.
the classic paths that people will also go in, if it's not the vertical leadership kind of tier, it will be the more complexity tier where you're going up from like a kind of that engineering path and to technical support and supporting much more complex products where you do need that full depth of knowledge and really be able to like take on more and more and more complex issues and speak the language there.
Yeah.
You mentioned before you obviously you've gone through this journey yourself, and now you're a founder helping solve a support problem that you faced for many years. How do you feel about support people growing into, following in that path in your footsteps of becoming that individual starting something?
Yeah, Neil, I'll be very honest. I did not think I would go down this path ever. My husband fondly recalls about, I think, 3 or 4 years ago. I told him, you know what? I'm the best employee any company can ever have. Like, I love being this, like, hyper productive, like taking ownership kind of employee. And I don't think, like, entrepreneurship is something that I want to get into because my parents have been, in tech as an entrepreneur for many, many decades now. And so everyone would be like, oh, like, are you going to like follow their path? And I'd be like, no, no, no. I'm solid being an employee. I love this life. I love helping people. I love cutting off from work and having my own life. And I think that's what life is, right? Like, you never know where things, spring up from. And I think it sort of was brewing for some time. But I think what it really came down to was, I think, someone's appetite for ownership. I think when you go down the founder journey, the amount of ownership that you need to take is just, I don't know, multifold. Like, I can't even explain the kind of things that I end up doing on a day-to-day basis. It's hardly building product every day. There's legal stuff, there's accounting, there's hiring, there's setting culture, there's so many different pieces, and all of it boils down to what you bring as a founder to the table. So all that said, where support helped me chart or take this path was really how much exposure I naturally had as a support person within a company. Because I always see that support is one of those roles which actually looks at either a product or service, whatever you're supporting, as an end-to-end piece. You can never, and maybe in some cases, like when you have a very technical product, you probably have like very highly specialized areas of the product that you manage. But largely, if you look at support, it's something that you need to know end-to-end, both in terms of breadth and in terms of depth, which means that you have such a large view about how things are shaping that probably no one else in any other function does. So even if you take a product manager, for example, they are sort of working either on, say, the infrastructure side or on billing features or on one part of the core product. So oftentimes you find the support person having that large view. Now, this also meant that I was getting exposed to customers facing a whole bunch of issues, right? From, hey, I can't log in, to support tickets that would go on for months sometimes because they're just such complex issues, because these are power users, users who've been with the platform for several years, and the complexity of their issues is so different that you end up interacting with so many stakeholders. You talk to product teams, you talk to head of product. I remember working on like communication, um, new release communications. Like, what? Like, I'm as a support person, like I wasn't in any other different function. So I was literally in the support team, and sometimes incident responses, like how do I communicate, especially when there's data loss, for example. Those are very, very tricky situations where you have to, manage the emotions and the communications of a large set of audience. I think those are experiences I don't know if I would have gotten if I wasn't in support.
I think the exposure is a huge part, right? What
Yeah.
you mentioned is something that you do understand end to end. I've noticed a lot in my own experiences where you think that as a support person myself, when I was doing solo support and kind of starting to build things out, and as we grow as an organization, I'm like, okay, well, I think that everybody should know this, right? Like, I understand the whole journey and everything. And then somebody comes and they're like, but how do you not know that that's how it works? Like, how do you not know that? It's just not in people's view, right? Like, they don't need to interact with it every day. Support needs to understand the breadth and the depth, as you mentioned, whereas some might not always have that view. I think there's always a difference. Like, you hear a lot about employee shapes a bit when it comes to competencies and skills, and oftentimes you hear the T-shaped employee, where you have like a broad set of core skills, and then you can dive really deep into a functional kind of aspects. But I think that in a lot of cases, support people are actually a bit more V-shaped, where you start with that kind of support specialty, and as you grow, you get broader and broader and broader skills, and as you kind of expand and get that exposure, you're connecting with, as you mentioned, like everybody across the organization. You're managing incidents, you're doing communication that you might not have in that sense as well. And I think exactly what you're saying, like that exposure is a huge piece to actually being able to grow and put yourself in a good position.
Yeah.
I'm curious because you mentioned obviously you didn't expect to have the founder kind of direction in that sense, but you're there now. Do you feel that being in support, I mean, you're working also to solve a support problem in that sense, but do you feel that your support experience and history has changed the way that you look at things as a founder?
Oh my God, yes. I think this sort of fits into like a little bit more like maybe philosophy, like spiritual aspects. Because support as a role, if you see, it's a very challenging role, and typically you need to have a lot of empathy, because you're most often working with people who almost always don't have the amount of context that you do. So the patience, the empathy that you bring, and how you kind of have to disconnect and sort of not take things personally and understand that they are coming from a different place. I think this aspect uh, has shaped me as a person, how I view my relationships today. So sometimes I have friends who might be really disgruntled with something in their life, and they kind of take it out on each other. And in that moment, I can clearly see how you can sort of separate yourself from that situation and look at it as, hey, this is not personal. Like, they're going through something, and I want to be there for them in whatever way they want me to be there. So I think support has helped me see those things where another example that I often think of, and is such a nuanced thing, is in support you can there's a fine line between educating someone and sort of patronizing someone. If you don't know the type of user you're dealing with, and if you over explain, that can put them in a really bad mood. And if it's someone who doesn't know a lot, but you're talking to them like, they know everything, they may be made to feel stupid. So you have to sort of balance and walk that line very, very carefully. So I feel like those are aspects that also shaped me as a person, has helped me in my personal relationships. Um, so I think there was a spiritual unfolding for me through my work in support, because it's so easy to get caught up in those emotions. I've had moments where, you know um, a customer would like speak very harshly, and I would take it so personally, and I'd be, going in loops in my mind for like at least a few hours, and like, uh, and it becomes really challenging to do anything else. So I think learning how to separate myself from the situation actually taught me a skill that I didn't know would, generally be useful in my life. But I think that was such a cool outcome for me being in support. And I think it's one of the core principles or the pillars that actually kept me in support, because it was teaching me so much about both myself and generally about the world.
I I love all of that. I think it's absolutely wonderful to hear like that. That I think that I don't want to say apathy, but knowing and understanding when you can kind of protect yourself as well from going into certain things. People think that empathy and support is really always on all the time, but I think that using apathy as a skill to disconnect yourself a little bit and protect yourself is also a very, very important and maybe underrated or underspoken about thing. I,
Yeah.
I was working with my team the other day, and they had like a really rough day, like double incidents. We had a product launch, like it was just a long one for sure. And one thing came in that wouldn't normally get under their skin, but for some reason, like after this huge, crazy, long day of chaos, of trying to sort it, it really did, and it really seemed to bother them for the entire like rest of the day. And we're just like, okay, like try to remove yourself, try to think about it, take a break, reset, do these things. And I think that's something that's, yeah, if you're not working in the world of support, you don't experience a lot of the time the need to do it in that sense. So I really appreciate what you say around it's really teaching a lot of not just functional growing, putting yourself in a position for the organization, but also a bit more of these emotional things where you actually learn to navigate others' emotions as well
Yeah.
uh, throughout it. I'm curious because you said as well you jumped through a few different areas, becoming different roles, becoming different bridges, and kind of being able to build sort of different profiles within the companies that you go to and kind of collect
Mhm.
all this knowledge and skills. How do you set yourself in the position to do that as an individual?
That's a really good question. Um, I think my number one thing is ownership. So I think being in support, one of the things you just learn is how to spot problems. And going, I think one of the very early skills I learned in support is you don't just answer the question the customer is asking, but you think of the next two things they may ask and preemptively answer those. So I think that sort of helped me start looking for gaps and really take ownership proactively. I think that has been the number one like factor now looking back. I think one so ownership is one. Second is collaboration. I think it's so easy, or I've fallen into that trap multiple times, where as an individual contributor you can get very hyper focused into your own work and your own role. And so coaching and helping each other out in support, I think, was another big factor that helped me grow, because when you're either teaching someone or when someone's teaching you, there are other parts of your brain I feel like you start using. So like, when you teach someone, the depth at which that knowledge gets absorbed into your own self is a lot more than when you are just sitting by yourself reading something. So what that led to was just doing a lot of documentation work. So if I learned something cool, if I learned like a workaround for a problem that a customer asked, and even if it was just the first time, I would quickly write like 2 sentences about it and post it off on my Slack channel, so for anyone else to read. And I think I want to appreciate one of the teams that I worked with that I really, really loved, which was at Zapier. And one of the things that they cultivated within the team was, if you have a question, come to the public Slack channel and ask there, because you'll be surprised at how many other people have had the same question. And tomorrow it just becomes like a nice rolling repository of questions that you can tap into. So taking ownership, which is taking that time out, a little bit of extra time out to look at, hey, what are some problems that have just been lingering around in limbo, that nobody seems to have picked up, and just picking that up and seeing what you can do with it. Like, it's not about solving something perfectly, but it is about attempting to solve something which sort of opens up your mind to a different part of that function that you've been working in. And the other is to really help other people on the team. So if anyone gets the opportunity to train a new person joining the team, absolutely take that, because it's such a valuable skill. I think that's what opened my doors to like understanding leadership, because in a way, when you're training someone, coaching someone new, you have to give them a lot of feedback. You have to help them learn the ropes, but also not at their own sweet pace, but at a pace that you need people to move to sort of catch up and start contributing to the team. So it's again a fine balance there. So I think ownership and helping each other out.
I think the ownership piece is really, really important. I had a conversation with Katerina Ostapenko, who was
Mm-hmm.
also talking about, you need to take on things from other teams as well. With people, you're collaborating with them, you're understanding a lot more around the things that are their problems and the things that they actually need help with. And if you have that good collaboration, like you're talking about, really working with other people, really being able to set yourself up for good relationships within the organization, and you're also taking ownership of some of the things that maybe they don't have the tools or capacity or capabilities to solve, but you do, and you can take ownership over that and really step up to take those things on. You just put yourself in a more strategic position to have those opportunities available to you and when they are ready. I think that's definitely something that has come up a lot in the
Yeah,
conversations. Always is about that kind of yeah, being able to be ready and put yourself out there when it is time to, and take responsibility for it. In that sense, I tell people who are growing, there's two types of ownership.
mm-hmm.
There is the ownership of owning your emotions and actions and how you show up,
Mm.
which is one. And then number two, there's a level of ownership which is putting yourself in a position to be held accountable for certain results. If that is taking on responsibility for something, you want to grow in your role or function, that is one level of ownership, would take on more responsibilities and then be responsible for them, in that sense. That shows that you're ready to step up. And then
Yeah,
if on the other side of it, if you take ownership for your emotions and how you show up, it's a lot better for people to build trust and reliability and actually, build a relationship with you if
yeah,
you take that personal accountability as well.
that's beautiful. I love that. Yeah.
We've gone through the journey. You've been able to build a lot around, building up those skills and actually putting yourself in a good position. You've collaborated with a whole bunch of people. You've actually taken ownership over a lot of things. And I think one thing when it comes to career growth or positions as well that comes up is, hey, I've done all these things. How do I actually get that step? Some
Yeah.
people, I think, maybe expect it to come at some point, or maybe like don't know how to take that next step of like, I'm doing all these things, let me advocate for myself.
Mm.
Do you have any advice for those people who might struggle with that?
Yeah, I don't know advice, but I can again just talk about the things that worked for me and even didn't work for me. One thing that definitely didn't work for me was waiting around for opportunities. I think I you increase your odds in as much as you put yourself and ask for those opportunities. So I think that's very, very critical. It's so uncomfortable to do that. Trust me, it's like really, really hard.
It's
So
very uncomfortable.
yeah, it's so uncomfortable. And so anyone out there who's like, yeah, just go ask for it. Like I get it. It's tough. It's really, really tough. And at the same time, there is no magic pill, unfortunately. Like you have to advocate for yourself. But a couple of things that really sealed the deals for me multiple times repeatedly was keeping a track of what I'm doing. If there was a praise on Slack, please screenshot it, grab the link, keep it ready for your performance review. So having one rolling doc where I would constantly throw things in. So even if it's like, some note or like a Google note or wherever it's easy for you to throw things in quickly, to keep collecting those examples, because trust me, you will not remember what you did 1 month ago.
Keep your
It will
receipts.
not. Yeah, keep your receipts, exactly. Otherwise, if there's no proof, no one's going to really believe that you did it. So even you yourself might forget. So it's very critical to build a story, a narrative around what your ownership has looked like, both in terms of your core role that you've been hired for, and then where have you gone that extra mile. So there are people who might send you praise or send you feedback, even constructive feedback. Showing growth on those is another big lever where you can say, hey, like I received this constructive feedback and these are the exact steps I've taken. And now look, the same person who gave me that feedback has now told me that I've actually like done really well in that area. So those kind of examples are really important to collect. Um, Second thing that I think really helped was finding someone not from my function within the company to actually talk to on a regular basis, to sort of use them as someone that you can bounce off ideas with, talk about certain challenges. So pick someone who is maybe one level above you. So if you want to like stay in an IC role and say you're a support engineer, find someone who is on the same level as a senior support engineer, but maybe in a different capacity in a different team. And I think that really helped because I was able to talk very freely. It wasn't within my group of people, and that unlocked a lot of insights that I otherwise, or perspectives that I otherwise would have very easily missed. um, yeah, I think broadly those two. Again, there's so many things that you could do, but I think advocating for yourself starts from building that story narrative by actually collecting examples, and two is to find a mentor, someone that you can talk to.
I full-heartedly agree. I think number one, when you talk about keeping your receipts and making sure that you keep the information, I have two things around that. One, there is probably a lot of work that you do, whether it's cross-functionally, whether it's just individually, that is not seen at certain levels, and that in itself makes it difficult for people to say, "Oh, you really are growing, you really are doing these things," if they don't see that work that's being done. And actually having it and saying, like, actually I have these very clear examples of where that actually does apply is huge, because some people might have skip levels, some people might be having these performance conversations with others, or people who you don't normally interact with on a regular basis, who see that work that you do all the time.
Mhm.
So to them it needs to be really visible to be seen. So one, I think that is really important and useful for keeping that hidden work logged and recorded. Number two, the really nice part about it, if you're collecting all those celebrations that you mentioned, you got really good feedback, you got these things, on tough days, it's a really good reference to go back and look at all the amazing things that you're doing if you're having a really tough day with your imposter syndrome, or you are just, it's just a rough one. Like, go back and look at all the amazing things that you've accomplished and the things that people have said. It's an amazing reference to go back and take a look at and see. It's great.
I love that. Yeah.
The second part that you mentioned around internal mentors, I think finding somebody outside of your department, I personally can say has helped me so much. Just having other people in a different department that aren't necessarily in your absolute day to day, that you can have those kind of open conversations with. They can be objective. They can also tell you about some of the things that are happening within the organization you might not see. And so it gives you information to help you understand how to navigate the situations a little bit better. Those internal mentors are so helpful. So I think that's absolutely wonderful advice.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah.
It's very similar, but I have one last question for you. Over the course of your entire journey, which you've been amazingly thankful, I'm amazingly thankful for you to have shared and gone through. Is there one thing that you've learned over the course of your professional journey that you still stick to today?
Um, I think in any situation, uh, there is a part that I've played that I can be responsible for. Any situation, even if it's a disgruntled customer, and the way I responded and that chain going bad, there's a part that I played that I can take responsibility for. I think that view has kept me grounded in terms of not always placing, I don't know, I don't like to say blame, but maybe that's the word, not always placing the blame on someone else. Then you feel like you're more in control of the situation, because the minute I place blame on someone else, it it feels like, okay, there's nothing I can do about this. But if you take a step back, there is always something that you can do about the situation that you're in, to go one step further to change that situation. So I always try to remind myself anytime I'm feeling like, oh my God, I've been wronged, or this wasn't okay. I try to take a step back and see, okay, what is it that's in my control? What did I contribute for the situation to come up in that way? So I think that's one thing that I will always hold on to. It has helped me. It is the piece of advice that I got very early in my career, which is so tough to hear, because it's a very tough feedback to hear from a manager when they're like, hey, like, you actually screwed up too. And so I think I will always hold on to that.
I love that, and I love it because one of the things that we've built into our career progression ladder through our teams is, as you do it, part of avoiding placing blame is an important piece of that. And I recognize that, because there are a lot of things. It's so easy to just say, "Oh, yeah, it's not me. It was something else. Something happened." It's so easy, but if you can take responsibility or look internally and take that step back, then it can be something that you really can actually take action on and make it more actionable for yourself and see what those opportunities for growth are.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your experience and
Thank you.
your journey, and hopefully being able to help other people take those steps in their journey that might feel uncomfortable, or that they might not necessarily be ready for, and give them the tools. Uh, I wanted to just ask, because you had mentioned you're solving a support problem, but we didn't talk about what support problem you're solving.
Sure, I can very quickly tell you about that. So, I think through all of these years of doing support, one thing is building knowledge, especially writing knowledge bases to help your customers be more self-serve. But that content can go out of date pretty quickly, especially if you're working in a very high velocity product team, where things are changing, screens are changing, features are getting updated, and it was always a pass the buck. Nobody liked doing the updates part. Everyone loved writing the article. Everyone loved explaining from the customer's point of view. Nobody liked the grunt work. They're like, I'm not going to do that. So I think especially after Gen AI came out, it's become a much bigger problem. Companies want to implement chatbot, and it's become a much, much bigger pain. So that's the pain we're trying to solve with Pageloop.
You actually try to make sure that maintenance of knowledge stays up to date.
Yeah.
It's so easy for it to go out of hand and get really
Yeah.
old and crazy.
Yeah. I don't blame anyone for it. It is very boring work. So yeah.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And then
Thanks,
thank you
Neil.
again for joining me. It's been such a pleasure
Likewise.
to be able to talk a bit more in depth as well. If people want to continue the conversation, how can they connect with you?
LinkedIn's great. And if you're on support driven, you can reach out to me there as well. But LinkedIn, I'm always available there.
Nice.
Yeah,
Thank you
thank
so
you so
much.
much, Neil. Really appreciate this opportunity again. Lovely chatting with you.
You as well.